Hello everyone, I'm Adrien Demuth. I'm here for CoChess, the channel Level Up Your Chess. So we are here for 1 hour to speak about how to make a plan in chess. So I will try to give you some tips of how to organize your thoughts, how to think clearly in a game. So of course there is no one one and only solution to make a plan. Things are in chess are really tough, so I will try to at least give you some tips of how to do it. First of all, so I'm in the YouTube channel, so I can follow the chat. So if you have any question, or if you can tell me if everything works, if you can hear me and everything, um, I think it seems to me that it's working, but I'm not necessarily right. But still, feel free to ask me any questions. So try to be as specific as possible, because if I only see your questions a few minutes after you asked it, I might not see about what move you were talking or anything. So just try to be as precise as possible, and we try to answer any of your questions. So let's start. We have a few positions and a few games to discuss. I will try to. I have selected different kind of games, different kind of position where you have different solutions of how to make a plan. So in this first example, so we are following a game a long time ago between Fuhrman and Keres. A game lost by Keres, which was especially strong, even if he wasn't a world champion. So in this first example, it's a really classic position where you might already know some of the plans of the position. So you already may have an idea, if you are aware of this kind of position, you may have an idea of what are the usual plans. So we will try just to discuss which are possible and how we made his choice in the game. Then we will have a position where we don't have any specific idea of what is going on or of what we should do, but still there are some possible plans to understand. And last, we will have positions where it's really not clear how to make a plan. There is no immediate way to organize your pieces, and then I will try to give you some tips of how to do it. So first, just checking the chat. Okay, so what's going on in this position? We are from white side. Black just went bishop c6, so placing the bishop on the long diagonal. So it's a really classic position where white has an isolated d-pawn. So it may arise from various different openings, such as the Alapin in the Sicilian, or some Slav defense, some Queen's Gambit accepted, the Panov, of course. There are many openings leading to this kind of middle game. So first of all, you may know some usual plans for white. The first idea, I will kind of make a resume for those who don't really know this kind of positions. First of all, white has an isolated d4 pawn. It may be seen as a weakness, so I'm trying to... okay. So it may be seen as a weakness because it's isolated, of course, but it's also a plan which allows white to have more space on the center. So you can, for example, control squares as c5 and e5. So it gives white a space advantage, because on the other hand, black can only control squares which are d5 and f5, so more on his camp. So this central pawn it's true, it's a weakness, but it's also something that allows white to have more space, and he may want to use it in order to have the most active pieces, and sometimes, and usually, he wants to launch an attack on the king side. So how does it do it? First, he should try not to trade pieces as much as possible. The only trade white is allowing is knight takes c3, because usually it's okay if black takes, because then the b pawns come back to c3 and d4 is no longer isolated, and sometimes the hanging pawns are going up to c4. So it would be, I'm not perfect with the arrows, but then the two hanging pawns in the center might be very strong, so it may allow white to push d5 then. So usually the only trade we allow is knight c3. That means you don't want to go with a move like knight e4, just trading everything. This is not what you want. And to launch an attack, there are different plans. The most common one is to go with bishop c2 and queen to d3. Whoops, sorry. So that way the queen directly eyes toward h7, and it may force black to at some point play g6 in order to prevent any problems on h7, because of course it's protected by the knight on f6, but this knight is not going to be there forever, so g6 might be a move that black needs to play, but then of course the king side is weakened by black. So this is the main first plan, but there are two problems here. First of all, in this case black would be able to go knight b4 at any moment, chasing either the queen or the bishop from c2. So there is one big problem in white's position, is that the pawn is on a4 while he should be on a3 actually, to prevent this move knight b4. So it was in the opening that it was played, it was not white's fault, it was not a bad move, but here this plan is basically impossible, so white should forget about it. I think the second biggest plan in the isolated pawn is to push d4, d5. But of course here it's even more impossible because there is already a knight, a black knight on d5. So it's clearly impossible for black to do something like, for white to do something like this. So I'm just checking the questions. After black plays g6, how to attack from white? Well, there will be some possibilities. First of all, what is going in the next comment is very right. But of course, after g6, once g6 is played, we can see that already the h6 square is really weakened, so we can use it and try to bring the pieces from the king side. Anyway, g6 will happen in the game, so you will have a look of all to do it. Another plan is to go with f4 and f5, but here also it's not really possible, because if whites want to go with this plan, he has to have kept the rook on f1. So here he should probably have freed the other rook from on d1 and try to go f4, f5. This plan is really interesting too, because once white gets rid of the e6 pawn, first it opens the f5 for the rook, and also it weakens the knight on d5, and it may prove to be very, very good for the bishop on b3. So we can see many pieces eyeing towards f7. There is no the knight on e5, the bishop on b3, and the rooks coming on f5 and f1. But again, this plan is unfortunately not possible. So white needs to find for something else. Usually to launch an attack you need of course to have pieces around the black king. So here the key for white is to find a solution to bring pieces. And when you think about pieces, you think of course of heavy pieces, and this time it's as mentioned, I saw it in the channel, in the chat. The rook can go towards the king side via d3. That's how I think he made his plan. I think he checked many of the possible plans from white side. He tried to analyze it and to know if it's playable or not. Most of them are not. So he's going for another plan just to bring the pieces towards the king side. So he went for rook d3, which is a very strong move, and Indeed, the point is to bring the rook to h3. It's also possible to place it on g3, but usually it's a little bit less accurate. The pawn you want to attack is usually the pawn on h7, because this one is hard to protect, while the g pawn, it's always possible for black to go g6 and to have less problems. g6 is quite well protected, so it won't be much of a problem to have a rook over g3. So let's move forward a bit in this game. Black went queen to d6, so just trying to put the rooks on the files, also protecting the pawn on e6 so that the ideas of knight takes f7 are gone. This is also a classical sacrifice that black may keep in mind. So okay, it stops this idea, and also the queen is eyeing towards the queen b4. If we don't use the knight to go here, the queen might be very strong here, chasing the bishop, maybe attacking d4, a4, b2. There are many ideas for the queen to be here, so the queen might be very strong on b4. So before going for rook h3, white started with rook d1, rook d8, and now rook to h3. And already here there are several ideas for white. There are some threats actually. For example, after rook ac8, there we can see already some attacks on f7, on h7 as well. And you just need to get rid of the bishop on f6, and that's why you are able to take on d5 immediately. So takes on d5, and usually black wants to take back with the knight, but here it's just refuted by queen h5, immediately attacking both both f7 and h7, and it's actually just mate, force mate already for white, because there is the threat of queen takes h7 and queen h8, and for example, if h6 is played, there are other mates, let's say, knight h6 and rook takes h6 and its mate. So things might be very quick, as we can see. So rook ac8 would already be quite a careless move, not doing anything for the king side. So knight takes d5 is a problem, and after, for example, bishop takes, there is ideas of taking on f6, and in case of any takes, there are some, again, queen h5 ideas. So it would be really bad for black, who has to protect f7 in priority. So taking on e5 is just met with d takes e5. We attack the queen, we will take on h7. It's already a pawn up for white after queen h7, so it's much better for white. So okay, we can see the problems after rook ac8. That's why black decided to go for g6 immediately in order to stop any queen h5 idea. We can see that our plan have already succeeded, and because g6 is a weakening move from black's point of view. So here again, this move g6 is trying to stop most of white's plan. We can see that queen h5 is not possible. So what to do now? Of course we want to continue the attack, but we won't be able to attack anything without the queen. So we need to find a way to bring the queen into play. So I will give you just a few seconds to think of a plan of how to bring the queen towards the king side. You will see that things are not so easy, because once you go queen f3, sorry, there are some problems with the bishop from c6, so taking on c3 would be possible for black. After a careless move also, like queen d3, there would be some possible ideas of knight h5, intending to grab the f4 square and also to try the bishops. So knight h5 might be possible. You have to consider rook takes h5, but it might be an idea for black. So Let's try to find a way for white to bring the queen towards the king side. And it's not so easy. While you think about it, I will try to see if there are some questions. No new questions. Anishkiri sends his regards. Thank you. Very nice from him. I guess it's not him, of course. So how to do it? Actually, there is one piece that is one white piece that is preventing us from bringing the queen towards the king side. It's the bishop on g5. It's true, if the bishop wasn't here, we could easily go queen d2 and queen h6, and the queen is has managed to go to the dangerous squares for black, and if the queen is chased by the bishop, it can come back to h4, still sneaking around the king, and would be quite annoying for black. So what to do with this bishop? You don't want to trade it again. It would only help black to protect himself. So simply bringing it back to his initial square, bishop to c1, and you can see the plan of bringing the queen toward h6 from d2 to h6. And also one additional idea is that the bishop is still controlling the super important f4 square. We can see that it's not possible to go knight f4, and it's pretty important. That's why we didn't go bishop to h4, because we don't want to allow this knight to go to f4. So this is basically a very strong return move. There is no solution for black to prevent queen d2, queen h6. So black went rook c8, queen d2. And it still tried to stop it by playing knight h5. Now the point after knight h5 is that if white goes queen h6, then bishop f8 is just chasing the queen, and the queen doesn't have access to the square on h4, so he has to come back to g5, and it's more or less a repetition of moves, so it wouldn't be great. And there are also, as I can see, there are also some ideas with f6. So this is definitely not something whites want to see happening. So queen h6 is stopped, but as we already talked about, there is a strong reply for white. So bishop h6, queen d2, queen g5, just checking the chat. What about the f6 knight? I'm not sure about your question. Maybe something was hanging, but I don't think so. Anyway, we have managed to threaten queen h6, so black had to go knight to h5. That's maybe what you were meaning. And how to keep something alive on the game? It's simply, let's say, to sacrifice the rook. So we are not about planning anymore. We are about getting an attack, and we will cut this game very soon in order to have a look at the other games. So we can't have a look at this game entirely. So, but simply the idea of sacrificing the exchange is then to bring the knight towards the center with knight e4. So we are gaining a tempo on the queen, and after queen b4, simply queen d3, and the queen is able to go towards the g3 squares, which would be really annoying for white because the king is in huge danger. Let's consider that it's white to move after queen g3. Of course, king h8 is mated after knight f7 mate, and instead after king f8 there is bishop h6 chasing the king, and rook and queen to g8. With a mate to come on the next move after bishop f8, queen takes f7. I hope everyone managed to follow. I will just play a move to show this variation. Quite simple mate, let's say. Okay, so it would be just game over. So there is a threat. We can see that the black king is in huge danger. He managed to find some defense. Let's say he played h4, but it seems pretty clear there are not so many defenders for black, so he will already suffer in this position. and white went on to win in this game. So let's not consider the rest of the game, it's not our interest. I want to show you other plans for white in other games. So let's try with yeah, this one. So we're in a new position, so it was a position from the Nimso-Indian opening. So we are going to think from black's perspective. First of all, let's have a look at the material on the board. We can easily see that white has, let's say, an advantage. He has a bishop pair. So that means we don't have really the exact same piece, the exact material balance on the board, and that means some things about the position. You might know already that when you have the bishop pair, you want to open the position as white. This is a general knowledge, this is a general rule. Whites want to open the position to have long diagonals opens for his bishops. So white and black needs to keep it in mind. And black has the knight, so he might prefer to get a closed position. So first of all, if you want to make a plan, as in the previous game, you want to consider your opponent's plan. You have to see if your plan is more or less stopping your opponent's plan or completely denying he has any plan. And you always has to consider your opponent's ideas. It's the most important thing in this position, in this specific position. So here, first of all, from black, you're black, but you need to understand what is black's idea, what is white's idea, sorry. So let's take a few seconds here. Try to think what white wants to play. He may have two different plans. So let's consider these plans first. So let's see some questions. There are many. Yeah, exactly. Daniel Malta. It's from Zurich, 1953. It's from again a game between Max Euwe and Yuri Averbach. It's a really well-known game. Usually the end game is more well-known than the beginning, but this is the beginning of the game. So this is black's perspective. So what is white's plan first? We have said that whites want to open the center, so we may look for moves that are trading pawns, that are opening the center and the lines. So let's play a stupid move by black. Let's play, for example, a6, so that it's white's to play. Different plans includes, for example, c4, but right now it's not immediately strong because we would be able to take on d4 to force a pawn to come to d4 and then take on c4. And again, there is an isolated pawn, which is unfortunately impossible to take for black because of some easy tactics of bishop takes h7, very classic one, so the queen is lost. And so taking on d4 is impossible, but still the position has opened, but not in a really good way for white, because the pawn on d4 is like a long-term weakness. Compared to the previous game, there is already a minor piece trade which occurred, and also there are possibilities of stopping the advance of this pawn, of trading some other pieces. For example, after queen d7 and bishop f5, it will be possible for black to trade pieces, even if b6 is hanging, but we have played a6, which was quite a stupid move by black. So let's say c4 immediately is not really the threat, but white might be smarter by starting by taking on c5, so that he won't have any hang in any isolated pawn back on d4. So first take on c5 and then follow with the move c3, c4. So we can see that it's indeed opening the position. We can see the bishop is getting really strong. So again, black should try to close the position as much as possible and to go d4 at least cutting for now the bishop, but there might be some problems, some knight b3 issues, both attacking the pawn on c5 and the pawn on d4, and because we would be able to take everything on d4 again because of the ideas of bishop takes h7 at the end. So there are some problems for black here. It's really not an easy to play position for him. So d4 might be the best, but still okay for white, even good for white. And taking on c4 would be, of course, much easier for white because he now has two incredible bishops. We can see the diagonals here. We will go queen to c2, attacking h7 again. Then rook c1. There are some problems on the isolated pawn on c5. This would really be a hard position for black. He shouldn't allow this kind of plan. And the other plan, also a very classical one, is to go with f3 and e4 then. It's not so easy to realize right now, so I would say it's only the second plan, but usually whites want to open the position like this so that his rook is also coming into play from the f5. The problem is here d4 is not well protected enough because of some things like this, and there are no longer any ideas of taking on h7 with check. So it would be good for black right now, but keep in mind that the plan of f3 and e4 might be an idea for white. So what is the solution for black? How does he do to stop white's plan of taking on c5 and then playing c4? I give you a few seconds again. Well, so I have some guys in the chat who are a bit late. I can see some messages from the previous game, so it's already past. I'm sorry, but if you go back later to the video and you go slowly, I'm sure you might find some solution. No worries. Yeah, I know there are many amazing games from Zurich 1953. So exactly, Daniel Malta. Black should try to keep the position as close as possible, and the only way to have it is to push c4 himself. So indeed, the move c5, c4 is the right move here. So it closed the position for sure, and then the bishop remains really bad from b2. So I mean, pushing c4, c5, c4 might be a bad move in some cases. For example, in the London type of position, usually the move c5, c4 is quite dubious, because then, or at least it depends if then white will have time to go with the crushing push of going e4. So this is clearly critical if white will manage to go e4 or not to free himself. So because once the pawn is on c4, there is no longer pressure on d4, so it makes white's life easier to go e3, e4. So this is something to be very careful to play the move c5, c4. But here we will see that the plan will be quite straightforward for black. So this is going to be a good idea this time for black. So, but think of it with a lot of care, because sometimes the move c5, c4 might not be as strong as here. So of course bishop c2 has been played in the game. The bishop is staying on the best diagonal, and already now black should worry about the move e3, e4. So more with the move f3 first, as we will see, but this is already an idea. So the point is, if black wants to make the move e3, e4 difficult, he needs to weaken the pawn on d4. And to do it, he has to get rid of the pawn of c3, attack a chain of pawn from the start of him, from the bottom, and not the top of the chain. It's pointless. Here you can't do anything against d4 immediately, so you need to do something about c3 so that d4 is becoming weak. So he played the move b6, b5. He follows his idea on the king side. And as you may have think already, the point is to go a7, a5, and then push on b4, try to get rid of the c3 pawn. And of course, it's also black's majority on the queen side. So blacks may have protected passed pawn very soon. So it's also very, very important to mention. So b5 intending b4 very soon. So in case of immediate e4, I think things are going well for black. This time we would trade, probably, not to allow any continuation very quickly of e5 and then f4. I think blacks need to take on e4 and to trade the knight and then play bishop d5. So it's not an easy thing to understand, but then with black you are trying to simply trade the bishop so that white doesn't have the bishop pair anymore. So it's one of your goals when you are playing bishop and knight versus pair of bishops. Just try to trade the bishop so that you're playing knight versus bishop type of position, which are usually less hard to play, let's say. And here it's even better because there is the bishop on b2, which is already bad, let's say, so it will be really less strong than the knight coming to d5. The knight from d5 will be a monster, while the bishop will struggle to find a good spot. So this would be better for black, actually, with still some ideas of going a5 and b4. So white didn't go for e4 immediately. He played f3 first, and intending e4 of course, and black went a5. But again, there are some problems for white, so he didn't went for e4 immediately because of the simple move b5, b4. Simply not doing anything on the center, simply trying to get rid of the c3 pawn. And what should white do? It's not so easy actually. After a move like e5, the knight can come back to d7, and after f4, very important move here, f5 is a threat that we need to stop, and we will stop it by playing f7, f5 ourselves. Again, white's play is stopped, and f5 is not possible, and white has kind of hard thinking time here, because either he takes on f6 or he keeps the tension, the position with a strong pawn on e5. And unfortunately for him, if he doesn't take, then he won't be able to do anything on the king side. The position is too closed, so he more or less needs to take, and after knight takes or queen takes, there might be some possibilities for black to try to trade the light square's bishop again, and then use the e4 square. And again, the bishop on b2 is like a big pawn, it's not really doing much of a thing, so it would be again very good for black actually. So, but I think it just means that basically the position is here already is good for black. So white didn't go for this immediate move of e4, he went rook e1. First he went with queen b6, again always the same goal. First of all, the queen protects the b4 square one more time, so b4 will be even stronger. And the queen is attacking the pawn on d4, so that there are some problems after e4. So still the same ideas for black. So white decided to start with knight f1, trying to get the knight to g3, and then b4 of course is coming. And after taking everything, of course, black would have a very decent play here. For example, queen takes b4, and there are some problems on this bishop. So let's mention that the pawn on c4 is passed and protected, so a very strong pawn. So the position has opened a bit, but not on the side that white was willing to open the position, so black would be satisfied here. Instead, very critical move by white, he played queen d2. So of course, black didn't go for a trade on c3, because as we can see, after a trade on c3 bishop takes, it's quite hard to get anything on the b file. But instead he placed a pawn on b3, much stronger, to have a pawn on b3, forcing bishop b1 and f on a4. And maybe you might now recognize what endgame will be. Actually, again, we won't go any farther in the game, but the game ended in the endgame with some sacrifice by black's knights. I think at some point black has a knight on b5, a knight on d6, and then he sacked on a3, and then broke the other knight to b5, and then pushed the pawn on the king side, and he just managed to queen somehow. So this is from this opening that this game is well known. So the only task now for black to do is to prevent white from having a lot of play on the king side, and he played something that we mentioned already. He after I can show you, after e4 he just tried not to take anything. Of course he doesn't want to leave the three pawns moving on the king side and center, so he just protected everything. And after knight g3 he went for this plan of knight g8 followed with f5, very effective plan, stopping white's action and forcing him to take a decision on the center. He decided to take on f5, because if he goes e5, then we can see that this bishop on b1 can't move probably for the rest of the game, so that the rook on a1. So it's very critical now for white, because all black needs to do is to open the king side and to play with one or two or maybe even three extra pieces that can't come back into play. So quite a hard position for white, sorry. So he decided to try everything on f5, but eventually went on to lose the endgame. So that's it. I'm checking your questions before going to the next game. Yes, taking on. Yeah, of course, taking on d5 was an option, but as we saw, the passed pawn on d4 is not so strong. So yeah, it wasn't really great for black, this kind for white, this kind of plan of taking on d5 wouldn't be much of a problem for black. Okay, so no real questions, some consideration, very interesting white ones. Let's move on to the next game. So I had a game of mine, but I won't show you. I will stick to more interesting games, let's say. So the next one I want to do, I'm not sure, I think we will go for the position where it's actually quite hard to define what is the plan. So the position starts here after h takes g3. So in the previous games we have seen two kind of games. In the first one it was a very classical position where you can easily form a plan, because you may have some ideas of how to handle the position, so you may have some knowledge. In the second one it was quite clear how to see what is white's plan. So we had a plan, a reaction type of plan. So black had an idea of what white was willing to do, so we tried to stop his plan. But what you may wonder is what to do when you don't have really a clear way to organize your pieces. Like, there are often some either messy positions or simply positions where it's really not easy to know what you're willing to do. So this is a perfect type of position. So we have first of all, it's a very concrete position. There are some tensions, there are some ideas for black on the king side. So again, we will be from black's perspective. So let's think from black's point of view. So what can we do? First of all, the position is more or less opened, but still it seems like the bishops on d7 and e7 aren't doing a great effort in the game. So we might have some play on g3, but right now it's really well protected by already 3 pieces, and the king might come as also a defender. And the knight on c4 is a strong piece right now, because it keeps a knight on an eye on d2, and it can come back to e5 at any time, and it can't be attacked. It can only be traded. So this kind of knight is really annoying usually for white. So let's say it's a strong piece. But what do we want to do? It's not clear. So when you don't really have a clear thing in mind that you might want to do, if you don't know anything, if you don't know what your opponent wants to do. In this kind of cases, I usually try to apply the Makodenov Principle. So I don't know if you know what is the Makodenov Principle. It was formulated by Makodenov, which was a Soviet player. I would say from the 50s. I'm not sure, but so he went on with a few openings lines with his name, but also this principle. And this principle says that if you don't really know what to do, try to consider what is your piece which is having the least fine position. Try to analyze what is your worst piece and try to get it a better square. So it's really short-term kind of plans, but it's really good to have this in mind, just to know, to have some idea of what to do in this kind of position. If you really don't know what to do, try to analyze what is your worst pieces and try to make it better. And then try to do it for every of your pieces that are not well placed. And then at some point you will manage to find a plan. If your pieces are placed really well according to principles, then you will be able to have some tactics, some strategic plans. But first of all, try to get better pieces. So let's have a short analysis here of what is the worst pieces, because sometimes it's quite hard to know what is the worst. Sometimes it's not clear. Here we have already said that it can't really be the knight, which is in a really nice spot. Both rooks are on the g file. I think both are useful, and anyway none of them have really better place to go. Maybe the rook can come to f8, but okay, then what's next? It's more or less losing the goal of attacking on g3. So the question will be definitely between these 3 other pieces, the bishop on e7, the bishop on d7, and the queen on c7. It's like all these 3 pieces are not really playing anything right now. So either of these 3 pieces that you can try to get better is a really good thing for black. So let's find now a way to find a solution to improve these pieces. So I give you a few seconds to organize your thoughts. So yeah, hello everyone in the chat. Happy that you are here and speaking. It's very nice to have some material from the chat to talk about. Okay, so bishop to c6 has been proposed by Daniel Malta, but here has already found the problem. Indeed, it will be some knight bd4 ideas, so we will try to talk about that. And then some other moves were e5 and bishop g5, knight e5, okay, and the bishop on d7. So lots, at least 2 of you have already talked about the bishop on d7. It's true, it might be right now the worst piece. But still, actually, it's not really doing nothing, because indeed the problem, if you want to bring the bishop to c6, is that there would be knight d4. Actually, the bishop right now is quite nice on d7 because it can't be attacked, and it's protecting the pawn on c6, on e6, sorry. So that means that knight d4 is not attacking the pawn on e6. So just one small problem with what I said is that there is knight bd4, knight d2, but we can also an annoying fork. But we can bring the other knight to d4, and it would more or less do the same thing, attacking e6 and attacking the bishop. So, well, here, if you don't go bishop d7, then you might have some problems. So you have to more or less go back to d7. So bishop c6 would be nice, but it's not immediately effective. Somebody talked about bishop to g5, but also, of course, the bishop is having a new diagonal. But what is on this diagonal, like the square on d2? Well, you can try to try the knights on d2, but then what's next? The knight on c4 was very strong, so we don't really see what's the point of placing the bishop in front of the rook is doing much of a thing. So maybe then bishop knight to e5, okay, but I can try to trade rooks, queen, sorry. I have some ideas, and I don't feel like the bishop on g5 is right, considering the other pieces. It's in front of the rook. Maybe there will be some f4 ideas. Of course, there might be some problems on the g5, but it might be a possibility after bishop g5 and knight e5. And I don't feel like the bishop on g5 is right. And e5 also is a possibility, quite interesting actually. But there is, to my point of view, there is a strategic mistake here, is that you give up the pawn, the square on d5. That means I might have knight c3 and knight d5. So that might be a problem. So let's say e5 is a bit weakening, and it prevents knight e5 from being a possibility for white. So let's have a look. Let's say it's kind of an exercise, and let's see if you have other ideas. Yeah, e5 again is, but I don't feel it's strong enough, as I just said. So no one came up with the best answer here. Black decided to open as many lines as possible, even at the price of pawn. Let's say if it's possible to take it for white. And he went with d5, which is an extremely strong pawn move. There are a lot of new possibilities for black, but first of all, the queen is now also eyeing towards g3, and we have found a better square for the bishop on d6. But also, once there is a trade on d5 or on e4, any pawn that is traded on d5 or e4 will then enable black to use his bishop either from c6 or from maybe h3, as it will be possible in the game. So as we can see, it's like opening a lot of possibilities for black, especially for the queen, which has no action on the king side. Now it has one, and the bishop coming to d6. So it's like two pieces are going better in only one move. So d5 is really strong blow. Okay, so when d5 was offered in chat, I hope it was before I showed it. But yeah, d5 is the best move indeed. So white took on d5 because it seems worse to allow d takes e4 and followed with at some point, not immediately because knight would be hanging, but to allow bishop c4 with bishop c6 which would be on the weak light square diagonal, would be really annoying for white. So he did actually he decided to take on d5, so that at least black will have to bring the pawn back to d5, closing the diagonal. But what black didn't even care to do anything immediately. He went bishop d6, simply putting pressure on d6, on g3, sorry. So giving black some ideas of taking on g3 both times. For example, let's say white does nothing, so let's say a3, which would, of course, would be a bad move. Then, of course, white need to consider this kind of continuation, which would be winning for black, actually, with lots of play on the king, and if he takes, which would be again a bad move at the end. White is losing at least the bishop. Maybe he will get mated soon. Anyway, it's clearly good for black. So white need to worry about these sacrifices on g3, so immediately. That's why he went for a slow move. He went king to h1. So just moving the king away and from this dangerous g5. He also doesn't want to go to h2 because from h2 there is this diagonal too, so it wouldn't be really appealing to go to h2. So he goes to h1. So of course you want now to get rid of the d5 pawn, so black took back on d5. Sorry. And of course taking back is impossible due to bishop c6. So it was not a pawn sacrifice actually, because white is unable to take because of the pin of the queen. It's just losing a queen. So taking on d5 for white is impossible. He went queen to c3. So pinning the rook on g7. Why not? And of course black is willing to have as active pieces as possible, so he played bishop e5, stopping the pin. So knight bd4 comes, and again there is a new situation where there is no clear move, no clear way of what to play, because we have stopped white's threats. We don't have any threats to do immediately. We can see that there is a pin from the knight. This was the other idea of going queen c3. That means if the knight moves, white is really happy to trade queens. So now you need to find again what is the worst placed piece for black. So here it's becoming easier because we have found a solution for the bishop, and we have for the dark square's bishop, sorry. And we have already said that the queen is already playing. The queen is already having a small action. We will try that. We will find a better square for it very soon, but right now it's more or less playing, let's say. So the worst piece is bishop to d7, and I already told you which square it was going to go, but we are trying to get an attack, so it's really logical to get it very close to the white king. So he went bishop to h3. It's even gaining a tempo on the rook, so it hardly can be a bad move for white. But again, there is no possibility of taking anything. I mean, sacrificing on g3 is not working. It's just giving up too much material. There is not even a check. So you can't have any ideas of taking on g3 immediately, and so there would be some problems on this diagonal. So first of all, you need to again find the worst placed pieces. Now it's becoming clear that it's a queen, because the queen is still quite far from the king side, from the white castle. So try to find the best square for the queen and try to see what way you can bring it to. Of course, let's say the best square is g2, I agree, but you can't bring it to g2 immediately. So find the best realistic square for the queen and try to bring it there. I will try to see if you have some more questions. Bishop f5 to play bishop e4 was a possibility. We will see that black will try to bring a piece to e4, but it won't be the bishop actually. When does it start? I think it has already started, Niraj. I think you're a bit late. So what is the best square for the queen? If you could drop it from somewhere, where would it be? It may, of course, need a couple of moves to get there, but first of all, you have to picture what square you want to go. There are not lots of propositions, let's say, in the chat, so there is a small delay. That means I can't see your propositions immediately. But you might have come with thoughts like the G5 square. So for example, bring the queen to D8 and G5. So chasing the bishop, placing the queen on this file is quite decent. But it's not the best still. Normally it's the first thought that we may have, G5 or F6, but actually the best is not one of these two squares. The best is to bring the queen to H6, because this way it will chase the bishop and also have some ideas against this king on H1. So if you can manage to bring the queen to H6, it would be a lot of trouble for white, and indeed it's possible. Black went queen d6 immediately, so eyeing for the square on h6, and after bishop f3, black went queen h6, so intending to have any discovery check with the bishop, so it's very annoying. So that's why white is moving his king again. A few moves before he went for king h1, now he has to come back to g1, because we placed our pieces quite efficiently. So first of all, now you have to calculate the very direct sacrifices, because it looks more appealing. But actually, like bishop takes g3 is not working, because after bishop takes g3 and rook takes, of course white takes off as many pieces as possible, and then the king can head toward f2. He is not forced to go to the h file. It can run away from this file and goes to f2, and then he will manage to escape from e2 and d1. So it doesn't look like very dangerous, and also there is these possibilities of checks, discovery checks of the knight, which looks very annoying as a rook e8. So there are too many problems. It's not working. It's like miss some extra activity here. So bishop takes g3 is not working immediately, unfortunately. So what is the worst pieces? The worst piece in this position? Again, we have gotten better bishops. The bishop is great on e5. The bishop is great on h3. The queen is fine. So what is the last pieces? Well, now that we have improved every other pieces, it becomes clear that the best piece we had at the beginning, the knight on c4, is now the worst one, because it's the one which is more far from the king side. So what was the best piece is now the worst one. So improve it. So you may have some solutions of going to d6 and e4, but even smarter is to go through d2 actually. So that's why he went knight to d2. It's protected by the queen, so it's perfect. It attacks the rook on b1, also the bishop, which is a defender. So sometimes trading one of the defenders is a good solution, but it's not actually black's idea. The point is to bring another attacking piece into play. He went knight e4. So there are new ideas of sacrificing on g3 or on f2. It looks very frightening. It's winning a tempo on the queen, so it's very logical for white to take it. So he took on e4, and there is a new attacking piece, which is a pawn on e4. It's not really a piece, it's a pawn, but still it may be very useful, because it stops any ideas of knight f3 or queen f3 trying to go to the queen side, to the king side, to protect everything. And it might contain some ideas of going e3 in order to break the white castle, so it's really dangerous to see a pawn coming to e4. It's always a very important attacking piece for the camp who is willing to mate. So the end of the game went queen to d2, queen h4, attacking g3 one more time, and after queen h1, black simply took on g3, sacrificed the rook, and it was winning. But there was actually an even smarter move. We will finish with this small tactics, let's say. After a good strategic play, you even have to show some tactics to win. And here it's there might be a mate in 3 against. It's not forced, but it's very possible. There is a very nice mate that I will let you find. And yeah, so that's it. We have more or less finished. If you had enough time to think, I will show you. If you don't, you can stop the video a bit. The mate is happening after bishop to f1. Very smart move, and of course the king can go to g1, but it's nightmarish. And the point is, if white takes the queen, there is the very smart rook to g1, and after knight takes bishop g2, very nice mating finish. And of course we had to take away the g1 square to the king. That's why we didn't go bishop g2 immediately, after which there is no mate. So sacrifices the queen and then the rook on g1 and bishop g2. So that's it, we have finished. I hope you enjoyed it. If you wanna talk to me about anything about chess, you can write to me on CoChess. My profile is easy to find. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and that you managed to understand how to form a plan. Whether it's easy or not, you have normally some tips of how to do it, so I hope it helped you. And thanks for following me, and see you soon in chess tournament or in CoChess. Bye bye.